playground remained frozen. Teachers stared. Parents whispered. Even the bodyguards looked confused. The most feared man in the city had just thanked the poor teacher instead of punishing her. But why? Who was this teacher? And what secret could possibly make the mafia boss treat her differently from everyone else? Before we uncover the truth, take a moment to subscribe and follow the channel. If you love emotional mafia stories filled with shocking twists, hidden secrets, and unforgettable endings, you're in the right place. Hit the subscribe button now so you never miss the next incredible story. Miss Emily still had no idea that the greatest mystery of her life had just walked into her classroom. The morning sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when laughter echoed across the playground of Maple Grove Elementary School. Children chased one another between swings, teachers watched from a distance, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Until a scream shattered the calm. Two boys were rolling across the ground, throwing punches with surprising force. A circle of frightened children quickly formed around them, shouting for help. "Stop them! They're really fighting!" Miss Emily Carter dropped the stack of exercise books she was carrying and sprinted toward the commotion. At 28 years old, she was one of the youngest teachers in the school. Her salary barely covered rent, her shoes had been repaired more times than she could count, and every evening she worked a second job tutoring children just to survive. But whenever one of her students needed help, none of that mattered. She pushed through the crowd and grabbed the taller boy firmly by the shoulders. "Enough," she ordered. The playground fell silent. The smaller boy immediately backed away, wiping tears from his face. But the other child remained perfectly calm. His expensive school uniform was dusty, yet his expression never changed. He stared directly into Miss Emily's eyes with a confidence no ordinary 10-year-old should possess. "My father won't like this," he said quietly. A few children gasped. One little girl covered her mouth. Another boy whispered nervously, "That's Luca." His friend quickly interrupted. "Don't say his last name." Miss Emily folded her arms. "I don't care who your father is," she replied firmly. "In this school, everyone follows the same rules." Several teachers exchanged frightened glances. The school janitor slowly stopped sweeping. Even the principal, who had just stepped outside, suddenly looked pale. Luca said nothing else. He simply nodded once. "I understand." Miss Emily separated the two boys and escorted them toward the principal's office. She hadn't taken more than 10 steps when the deep rumble of engines filled the air. Every head turned. 1, 2, 5. 10 identical black SUVs rolled through the school gates. The playground became eerily quiet. Parents collecting younger children froze in place. Teachers instinctively gathered students behind them. The SUV doors opened in perfect unison. Men dressed in black suits stepped out one after another. Dark sunglasses. Earpieces. Cold expressions. Their movements were disciplined, almost military. The principal swallowed hard. "Oh no." One bodyguard approached calmly. "Where is Miss Emily Carter?" No one answered. The silence was almost unbearable. Then another vehicle arrived. Unlike the others, its door opened slowly. A tall man stepped out. His tailored black suit fit him perfectly. A silver watch gleamed beneath his sleeve, and his sharp eyes quietly surveyed the schoolyard. No one needed an introduction. Everyone knew who he was. The Mafia Boss. Fear spread through the crowd like wildfire. Some teachers instinctively stepped backward. Others lowered their heads. Parents hurried their children indoors. Miss Emily stood her ground. She still had one hand resting protectively on Luca's shoulder. The Mafia Boss walked past every bodyguard without speaking. He ignored the principal completely. Ignored the frightened teachers. Ignored every terrified stare. He stopped in front of his son. Then, to everyone's disbelief, he slowly knelt. He gently examined the bruise on Luca's cheek. "What happened?" he asked softly. Luca pointed toward Miss Emily. Every bodyguard stiffened. Several hands moved toward concealed weapons. The principal closed his eyes, expecting the worst. Instead, the Mafia Boss stood up. He looked directly at Miss Emily. A slow smile appeared on his face. "Thank you," he said. Nobody breathed. The most feared man in the city had just thanked the poor teacher instead of threatening her. But why? What had he seen that everyone else had missed? Before we uncover that mystery, make sure you subscribe and follow for more unforgettable mafia stories filled with shocking twists, hidden secrets, and emotional endings. You won't want to miss what happens next. As the crowd slowly began to recover from the shock, Miss Emily noticed something unusual around Luca's wrist. An old silver bracelet. Her heart skipped a beat. It looked exactly like the bracelet her older brother had worn before he mysteriously disappeared nearly 20 years ago. Impossible! Before she could speak, the Mafia Boss noticed the small wooden cross hanging around her neck. For just a split second, the confident ruler of an empire looked shaken. As he turned to leave, he leaned toward his chief bodyguard and whispered just loudly enough for him to hear. "Find out everything about that teacher." Miss Emily watched the convoy disappear through the school gates, completely unaware that her ordinary life had just collided with a secret powerful enough to shake an empire. Miss Emily barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same image, the silver bracelet on Luca's wrist. It couldn't be the same one. Her older brother, Daniel, had worn a bracelet just like it before he disappeared when she was only 8 years old. The police had searched for months but never found him. Eventually, everyone accepted that he was gone. Everyone except Emily. She still kept his old photograph inside the pages of her Bible. She still whispered a prayer for him every birthday. And now, somehow, that same bracelet had appeared on the wrist of the Mafia Boss's son. The next morning, she arrived at Maple Grove Elementary determined to focus on her students. But the whispers had already begun. "Did you hear?" She shouted at the Mafia Boss's son. "And she's still alive." Teachers peeked through classroom doors whenever Emily walked past. Some admired her courage. Others thought she had simply been lucky. Emily ignored them all. Her students mattered more than gossip. When Luca entered the classroom, every child watched him nervously. He quietly walked to his desk. No bodyguards followed him inside. No special treatment. No demands. Emily smiled warmly. "Good morning, Luca." He looked surprised. "You aren't angry?" She shook her head. "You made a mistake yesterday. That doesn't make you a bad child." For the first time since she had met him, the boy smiled. It was small. Almost invisible. But it was real. Across the city, inside a heavily guarded mansion, the Mafia Boss stood in front of a massive window overlooking the skyline. His chief bodyguard entered the office. "We investigated the teacher." The boss didn't turn around. "Tell me." "Emily Carter. 28 years old. Lives alone in a small apartment. Works 2 jobs to pay her bills. No criminal record. Loved by students. Lost her parents years ago. Her older brother disappeared when she was a child." The room became silent. "What was his name?" the boss asked quietly. "Daniel Carter." The Mafia Boss slowly closed his eyes. "So, it really is her." The bodyguard frowned. "You know her family." The boss opened an old wooden drawer and removed a faded photograph. A teenage boy stood beside him, both smiling despite their worn clothes. The boy wore a familiar silver bracelet. "Daniel." The bodyguard's eyes widened. "You've kept that picture all these years?" The boss carefully returned it to the drawer. There are debts that power can never repay. Before the bodyguard could ask another question, another man hurried into the office. "We have a problem." The boss turned. What happened? Our rivals have learned about the teacher. His expression hardened instantly. They believe she has become important to you. Silence filled the room. The bodyguard already understood what that meant. Anyone the Mafia boss cared about became a target. Back at school, the morning lessons ended peacefully. As the children lined up for lunch, Luca stayed behind. Miss Emily. Yes? He reached into his backpack and carefully removed the silver bracelet. My father said I should give this to you if you ever asked about it. Emily stared at it. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. She turned it over. On the inside, engraved in tiny letters, were two initials. D.C. Daniel Carter. Tears filled her eyes. Where did your father get this? Luca answered honestly. He said it belonged to someone who once saved his life. Emily's knees nearly gave way. Her brother had known the Mafia boss? Before she could ask another question, the school secretary rushed into the classroom. Miss Emily, there's an emergency. Emily hurried outside. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. She answered. Hello? A frightened elderly neighbor spoke so quickly she could barely understand. Emily, don't come home alone. Her heart began pounding. What happened? Someone broke into your apartment. Emily froze. They didn't steal anything. The woman's voice shook with fear. They were looking for something, and I think they may still be waiting for you. Emily slowly lowered the phone. Across the street from the school, a black sedan sat with its windows tinted dark. Inside, two men watched her every move. One of them smiled coldly. We found her. The other reached for his radio. Tell the boss, we're moving tonight. Emily had no idea that the mystery surrounding her missing brother had just become a deadly race against enemies she couldn't even see. Miss Emily's heart pounded as she stood outside the school, staring at her phone. Someone had broken into her apartment. Nothing had been stolen. Whoever had entered wasn't looking for money. They had been searching for something specific. She immediately thought of the silver bracelet now resting inside her handbag. Was that what they wanted? Trying to remain calm, she dismissed her students for the day and thanked the other teachers for watching over them. But as she stepped onto the sidewalk, a familiar black SUV pulled quietly to the curb. The chief bodyguard stepped out. Miss Carter. Emily instinctively took a step back. I don't need protection. You may not, he replied. But someone wants to hurt you. I can take care of myself. I wish that were true. Before she could answer, a deafening explosion erupted from the opposite side of the street. Boom! A park delivery van burst into flames. Parents screamed. Children ducked behind parked cars. The bodyguard immediately pulled Emily behind the armored SUV. Stay down! 3 masked gunmen emerged from the smoke, firing wildly toward the convoy. The bodyguards responded with disciplined precision, shielding nearby civilians and moving families to safety while engaging the attackers. Emily covered her ears as chaos swallowed the quiet neighborhood. Within moments, the attackers retreated into another waiting vehicle and disappeared into traffic. The shooting had lasted less than a minute. But everything had changed. The chief bodyguard looked at Emily. They weren't trying to rob you. They were trying to take you. Minutes later, Emily found herself inside the Mafia boss's heavily guarded estate. The enormous mansion felt strangely quiet. No loud celebrations. No expensive displays. Just disciplined guards and an air of constant vigilance. The Mafia boss entered the room carrying an old wooden box. He placed it gently on the table between them. I owe you the truth. Emily stared at him. My brother. His eyes lowered. Yes. He slowly opened the box. Inside were faded photographs. Old newspaper clippings. A pocket watch. Letters tied together with worn string. And one familiar smile. Daniel. Emily reached for the photograph with trembling hands. Her tears came instantly. You knew him. The Mafia boss nodded. We grew up in the same neighborhood. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. He wasn't a criminal. No. He was one of the bravest men I've ever known. The room became silent. The Mafia boss continued. Years ago, before I became the man people fear today, I was caught in a deadly ambush. Your brother risked his own life to get innocent families, including my young son, to safety. Emily wiped away her tears. What happened to him? He stayed behind so others could escape. He never came home. Emily closed her eyes. All these years? Her brother hadn't abandoned her. He had sacrificed himself. The Mafia boss looked genuinely regretful. I wanted to tell you the truth many times. So why didn't you? His expression hardened. Because someone close to me convinced me it would put you in danger. A knock interrupted the conversation. The chief bodyguard entered hurriedly. We've confirmed it. The Mafia boss looked up. Confirmed what? The leak came from inside. The room fell silent. Who? The bodyguard placed a file on the table. Our family attorney. Emily frowned. The lawyer. The Mafia boss nodded slowly. He's handled our affairs for nearly 20 years. He has secretly been working with our rivals. Emily couldn't understand. Why? For money. For power. And because Daniel discovered his betrayal before anyone else. The realization struck Emily like lightning. My brother didn't just disappear. He uncovered the truth. Before anyone could speak again, alarms echoed throughout the mansion. Red warning lights flashed across the hallways. The chief bodyguard pressed his earpiece. His face turned pale. They've breached the outer gate. The Mafia boss stood instantly. Protect everyone. Another voice shouted through the radio. They're not attacking the mansion. They've gone after Luca. Emily's heart stopped. The Mafia boss rushed outside as vehicle engines roared to life. Several minutes later, one battered SUV returned through the gates. Its doors flew open. The chief bodyguard stumbled out, bruised and bleeding. The Mafia boss grabbed him. Where is my son? The bodyguard struggled to speak. They took him. Everything went silent. The most feared man in the city slowly released his grip. For the first time anyone could remember. The Mafia boss dropped to his knees. His face showed not anger, but the unbearable pain of a father who believed he had failed his child. Somewhere inside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, little Luca sat tied to a chair. A familiar voice echoed through the darkness. The family lawyer stepped into the light, smiling coldly. He looked at the frightened boy and whispered, "Your father is finally going to hand me everything, or he'll never see you again." The moment the kidnapper's message reached the mansion, every room erupted into controlled chaos. Maps were spread across long tables. Security footage played on massive screens. Trusted captains received orders through encrypted radios. No one spoke louder than necessary. Every second mattered. The Mafia boss stood at the center of the command room, his eyes fixed on a blinking red dot marking the last known location of Luca's tracker. How long ago? He asked. 8 minutes, the chief bodyguard replied. The boss clenched his jaw. 8 minutes is enough to disappear. Another bodyguard rushed in carrying a laptop. We intercepted one of their transmissions. He pressed play. Static filled the room before the cold voice of the family lawyer emerged. If you want your son alive, come alone. The recording ended. Several captains immediately objected. It's a trap. They'll kill you. We should strike first. The Mafia boss remained silent. Then he looked at Emily. What would your brother do? The question caught everyone by surprise. Emily took a slow breath. Daniel always said that when people want you angry, they stop thinking clearly. He believed the strongest person in the room is usually the calmest. The boss gave a faint nod. Then we stay calm. For the first time since the kidnapping, fear gave way to strategy. While the bodyguards prepared rescue teams, Emily couldn't stop thinking about something the lawyer had said during the attack on her apartment. They're looking for something. Not someone. Something. She reached into her pocket and removed the small wooden cross she had worn since childhood. It had belonged to her mother. She had never taken it off. As she turned it over in her hands, she noticed something unusual. One side seemed slightly loose. Her fingers carefully pressed against it. Click! A tiny hidden compartment opened. Everyone leaned closer. Inside was a tightly folded piece of waterproof paper. Emily unfolded it with trembling hands. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. Names. Dates. Bank accounts. Secret meetings. Payments made over nearly 20 years. The family lawyer's name appeared again and again. So did the names of powerful politicians, corrupt officials, and wealthy businessmen. The chief bodyguard stared in disbelief. This could destroy every one of them. The mafia boss looked at Emily. Your brother hid the evidence where no one would ever think to look. Emily's eyes filled with tears. He trusted that one day I'd find it. The boss nodded. He knew you would protect the truth. Before anyone could speak again, another message arrived. The lawyer had sent a location. An abandoned shipping warehouse near the old harbor. It's too obvious, one captain warned. Exactly, the boss replied. He wants us to believe that's where Luca is. Emily studied the evidence hidden inside the cross. Then she noticed a small symbol drawn beside one address. A lighthouse. Her heart skipped a beat. I've seen this before. She quickly searched through the photographs from the wooden box. One picture showed Daniel standing beside an old lighthouse with the mafia boss years earlier. Emily held up the photo. This isn't just a picture. She pointed toward a faded warehouse behind them. It's the same building. The chief bodyguard compared both images. She's right. The mafia boss smiled for the first time that day. My old friend, you left us one final clue. Within minutes, the convoy changed direction. Instead of driving toward the harbor, they headed for the abandoned lighthouse on the edge of the city. As night settled over the coastline, dozens of bodyguards quietly surrounded the weathered building. No shouting. No flashing lights. Only careful planning. The chief bodyguard whispered into his radio. All teams in position. The mafia boss turned to Emily. You stay behind us. She shook her head. No. This started because of my family. I won't hide while others risk their lives. For a moment, he saw the same determination that had once lived in Daniel's eyes. You really are his sister. The rescue team entered the building. Room by room, they searched. Empty. Another room. Empty. Then, a faint voice echoed from below. Dad! Luca! The mafia boss rushed toward the sound, but Emily grabbed his arm. Wait. He stopped. She pointed to a nearly invisible wire stretched across the doorway. A trap. The bomb specialist quickly moved forward. Seconds later, he carefully disabled the explosive device hidden beneath the floor. Everyone looked at Emily. Had she not noticed the wire, the rescue team would have triggered the trap. The mafia boss looked at her with quiet gratitude. You just saved all of us. Moments later, the hidden door burst open. Luca ran into his father's arms. The mafia boss held his son tightly, unable to speak. For several long seconds, nothing else mattered. Power. Money. Fear. None of it compared to this moment. Emily smiled through tears. Daniel's sacrifice had protected another generation. But the celebration lasted only a heartbeat. A slow clap echoed through the warehouse. Everyone turned. A tall man stepped from the shadows, dressed in an elegant dark coat. His face was calm, almost familiar. The Mafia boss stared at him in stunned silence. "No." The stranger smiled. "It's been a long time, brother." Every bodyguard froze. Emily looked from one man to the other. The family lawyer wasn't the true mastermind. He had only been following orders. The real enemy was someone the Mafia boss had mourned for years. Someone he believed had died long ago. And now, he had returned to finish what he had started. The warehouse fell into complete silence. Even the waves crashing against the rocky shore seemed to fade into the background. The Mafia boss stared at the man standing before him. "It can't be." The stranger smiled faintly. "You buried me years ago. I watched my own funeral." Emily looked between the two men, unable to understand. Luca clung tightly to his father's hand. The chief bodyguard slowly stepped forward. "Boss, who is he?" The Mafia boss took a deep breath. "My older brother? Marco." Gasps echoed throughout the warehouse. Everyone in the organization believed Marco had died nearly 25 years earlier during a violent betrayal that changed the family's future forever. But he had never died. He had disappeared. And while the world mourned him, he had quietly built an empire of his own from the shadows. Marco laughed softly. "You built everything we dreamed of. Now I'm here to take it back." The family lawyer walked to Marco's side, lowering his head with respect. "I told you he'd come." Marco nodded. "You've served me well." The Mafia boss looked at his brother with sadness rather than hatred. "You destroyed innocent lives. You kidnapped my son. You betrayed your own blood." Marco's smile disappeared. "I did what power demanded." The Mafia boss slowly shook his head. "No. You did what greed demanded." Emily stepped forward, still holding the hidden list Daniel had protected all those years. "My brother died trying to stop people like you." Marco's eyes narrowed. "So, Daniel trusted you with the evidence." Emily held the papers higher. "He trusted the truth." Marco's expression hardened. "Give it to me." Emily refused. "You'll have to take it." Marco gave a small nod. Several armed men emerged from the shadows, surrounding the rescue team. The bodyguards immediately formed a protective circle around Emily and Luca. For a brief moment, it seemed another bloody battle was unavoidable. Then the Mafia boss raised his hand. "Nobody fires." Every guard looked at him in surprise. "Boss? If we fight now, innocent people will die." Marco laughed, still pretending to be honorable. The Mafia boss calmly reached inside his jacket. Every weapon in the warehouse turned toward him. Instead of drawing a gun, he removed his phone. He pressed one button. A live video call appeared on the giant monitor mounted inside the warehouse. Marco's confident smile vanished. Police investigators, federal prosecutors, anti-corruption officers. Every conversation inside the warehouse had been transmitted live. The names hidden inside Daniel's list had already been delivered to the authorities. The corrupt officials, the secret bank accounts, the bribery records, the illegal businesses. Every piece of evidence was now beyond Marco's reach. Emily finally understood. The rescue was never the only mission. The Mafia boss nodded. My son deserved to come home. But Daniel deserved justice. Sirens echoed in the distance. This time, they weren't coming for the Mafia boss. They were coming for the traitors. Marco looked around desperately. For the first time in decades, he realized he had already lost. The family lawyer tried to run. The chief bodyguard quickly stopped him. It's over. Within minutes, officers entered the warehouse and placed both men under arrest. Marco looked at his younger brother one last time. You could have ruled forever. The mafia boss answered quietly. I'd rather be remembered as a father than feared as a king. Marco lowered his head. He had no reply. Weeks later, the city slowly began to heal. The corrupt officials exposed by Daniel's evidence were removed from office. The criminal network that had operated in secret for decades collapsed. Daniel Carter's name was officially cleared. A memorial was built in his honor, recognizing him as a man who had sacrificed everything to protect innocent families. Emily stood before the memorial with tears in her eyes. For the first time since she was 8 years old. She wasn't wondering where her brother had gone. She finally knew who he had been. A hero. Luca returned to Maple Grove Elementary School. When he walked into Miss Emily's classroom, the other children watched nervously. Instead of acting like the son of the city's most feared man, Luca smiled politely. Good morning, Miss Emily. She smiled back. Good morning, Luca. From that day forward, he was known not as the mafia boss's son, but as the boy who learned that true strength begins with kindness. Several months later, the mafia boss quietly announced he was stepping away from the empire he had spent decades building. He established the Daniel Carter Foundation, funding schools, scholarships, and safe places for children who had lost their families. He asked Emily to lead its first academy. She accepted with humble gratitude. As children laughed across the new school's playground, the mafia boss stood beside Luca, watching from a distance. His son looked up at him. Dad? Yes? Was Miss Emily the one who changed everything? The mafia boss smiled as the afternoon sun bathed the playground in golden light. No, son. She reminded us of who we were always supposed to be. He took one final look at the school that now stood where fear had once ruled. Power had built his empire. But love? Honor? And the courage of one poor teacher had built his legacy. The mafia boss was remembered for many things. But in the end, his greatest victory wasn't winning a war, it was raising a son who would never need to fight one. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and turn on your notification bell icon for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching.